Hey everyone, Reaper here again with another video. This time I decided to make a short video on some controversial covers. Some are controversial because of the depictions of violence that's on them. Some are just controversial because it was just a different time than today. It might be taken, a completely different way that people did back 30, 40, 50 years ago. So without further ado, let's start showing some of these books. Okay, For Lovers Only. This is number 73. Now, is this a big controversial book? Not really. Probably most of you out there never even heard of it or saw this cover before. The reason why I chose this particular book is because that in today's society, this I think came out in the Bronze Age, so in the 70s, early 70s, I believe. I don't know the date off the top of my head. But, in today's, society, culture, whatever you want to call it. So in today's Me Too minded society, this book, you see it on the cover, the male taking charge and spanking his girlfriend because she's not a good girl. That will definitely be seen as controversial. When it came out, though, I don't think it really was a controversial book. Now here, Hansi. Is this a controversial book? Well, no, not necessarily. I mean, swastika covers are, when it comes to certain collectors out there, in particular the Golden Age, like Captain America books and all those other great Golden Age books that are escaping me, the titles are escaping me right now, swastika covers are highly desirable, yet they are still controversial, because of what they represented and so forth. Now, getting to this book, for those that may or may not know, it is a Christian book. But looking at it, you would never, just looking at the cover, you would never think that. You would have to read the book to see the message behind it and so forth. But yeah, I would say any swastika cover, can bring a certain amount of controversy if someone were to see it today, collector or non-collector. Here we go. Wolverine number 55, The Death of Sabretooth. This is a cover swipe of one of the most controversial covers ever. Now, this came out in modern times, within the last few years. I don't know the exact date. But, within the last decade, this book came out. So would this be considered controversial today? Probably not. I put it up here because it's still a very cool cover, and like I said a few moments ago, it's a swipe of one of the most controversial covers of all time. Still really cool to have, and you could get it pretty cheap. Now, this is a reprint of EERIE Comics number 1. This is a reprint of the very first horror comic. I believe this came out in 1947, maybe 48, one of those two. 47, right up here. Is it a big controversial book? No, but it's a bondage cover. Once again, like with the Nazi covers, bondage covers tend to be highly sought out. Now here you have the ghoul. I mean, to me it looks like a Nosferatu, but it's not. It's some type of ghoul coming after this young lady that's been tied up for him. So yeah, that's definitely, I think, can cause a little controversy. And again, a bondage cover. And there were a lot of these in the Golden Age, these type of covers, and they are coveted. There we go. Tales from the Crypt number 34. Is this a real major controversial cover? Well, it's a shows strangulation. I believe this was one of the books that was used during the Senate trials in 1954, 1955, whatever year that was. The seduction of the innocent trials, so to speak, because of the strangulation here. Jack the Ripper, wax model of Jack the Ripper, holding a young woman at knife point while having some type of rope or clothing around her neck. So it can be seen as somewhat controversial. Now here's another bondage cover. Let's see if you could see this without too much glare. Sorry, you see a little bit of glare here. I apologize for that. Let's move this back a little. Vault of Horror number 12. Not a controversial cover, I would, but definitely something that would raise eyebrows because it is a bondage cover. A guy tied up, about to be stretched out on this torture rack. So it's definitely something that I think a lot of horror fans, this book here is definitely something that a lot of horror fans, in particular EC fans, will go for. All right. Not too much to say about that one. Not like the next few that I'm going to show. Okay, Vault of Horror number 32. We go back to the Vault of Horror. Why is this one controversial? Okay, well, take a look at it. Here we have a zombie walking in through the door to eventually get revenge on this guy, because that's the way a lot of these EC titles were, stories were. But look at this. What's with this? You have this almost like this bright light coming from the zombie's head. Well, the reason why this one's controversial, long story short, too late, is because it's one of the censored covers. I know there were several censored covers. I don't know them all. I know some of them. This is one of them. Originally, and if you check this out in reprint form, and there are plenty of them out there in reprint form, there was a meat cleaver through this guy's head. So they went back, they being Bill Gaines and whomever else made the decision, to make this a little less controversial, and removed the meat cleaver and put this bright light coming from the zombie's head. Controversial because of the censorship of this issue. Here's another censored cover. The good doctor gifted me this book, this beauty of a book, Tales from the Crypt number 38. Another censored cover. Originally, the man was doing, he was chopping at somebody down here. And I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong for those that know better, but I believe that pieces of body parts were coming up, or blood was coming up from this, this case as he was moving the axe upward. Well, again, this is one of the books that was censored, so they just took that part out and just kept, you know, as if he's about to axe somebody, instead of the actual seeing parts of the motion, pieces of the body parts coming up, pieces of skin or whatever. So another controversial cover due to the censorship. Last, I got about 4 more here. All EC, of course. Shock Suspense Stories number 5. Why is this controversial? It's a lynching. Okay? I mean, how could you not think that a lynching is, how could you think a lynching is not controversial? Well, it is, even to today. Seeing something like this will raise eyebrows and will raise concerns, as it did back in the day, back when it first came out. Pretty cool, pretty cool. Here's another controversial. It's a bondage cover and a bigot cover. Shock Suspense Stories number 6. I think this story, the story behind the cover, so I forget the name of it, was absolutely awesome. Really creepy and definitely a worthwhile read. But I remember seeing this cover back when I first started collecting back in the early 90s in reprint form, and yes, it definitely made me look twice at it. I'm like, oh my God, what's going on here? And like I said with the last issue, it did the same thing back in the day when it first came out. Again, another bondage cover. This lady's tied up, and the bigots. It doesn't necessarily say who they are, but by looking at them, you can pretty much figure out who they are. But they're about to do bad things to her because of things that she's done. All right, last 2. One of the most controversial covers from the Crime Suspense Stories line. There are many of them. Okay, I've said it before and I'll say it again. Crime Suspense Stories has more controversial covers, more gruesome covers, or more suggestive covers than the horror titles. I truly believe that, and this is definitely one of them. One of the big ones. The infamous suicide cover. It looks like, well, it's a crime issue, so you figure somebody's breaking into this person's house and putting a gun to his head and shooting him, but it's not. When you look at the mirror, it's actually the guy, you know, holding the gun, blowing his own brains out. So yeah, definitely controversial. You know, for some 10-year-old kid, 8-year-old kid, Picking this up back in 1953, I think this came out. I think this came out 53. Maybe 54. I do not know off the top of my head. I think it actually came maybe 53, 54, whatever it is. Doesn't matter. 1950s. Your son or your daughter comes home with this. During those times, it's definitely going to make you say, what the hell? What the hell's going on? Even today, you look at this. Now, today, our society is a little different. We're more used to this sort of stuff. But definitely held a lot of controversy back in the day when it first came out. And the last book here, probably one of the most controversial covers of all time, and one of my personal favorites. Crime Suspense Stories number 22, the infamous decapitation cover. Yeah, I think most of us know the story behind it when Bill Gaines was trying to defend this. Oh, look, that's not red, it's not blood. Oh, that's not her head, it's not decapitated. All that other stuff that he tried to get around the person that was questioning him, but we all know what it is. It is a decapitation cover. The lady is decapitated in this story. I think it's in each and every package. It's just the first story in this book. Pretty cool story, pretty mean too, okay? But I do think that this is probably one of the most controversial covers, if not the most controversial comic book cover. I mean, sure, there are plenty of other covers out there. As you can see, remember I showed this earlier. This is a cover swipe of this, and there are many others I think out there that have similar cover swipes. But like I was saying, I think there are many books out there that are back in the day that were very gory, very graphic, more graphic than this, more gory than this. But I don't think they were as controversial as this. I think this was the straw that broke the camel's back and led to the development of the Comics Code and the eventual demise, not only of EC Comics as it was with the horror titles and the crime titles, but also a demise of seeing really, really good horror stories or horror characters or creatures or monsters for almost 2 decades. Thank you all for watching, and take care.